The first thing I noticed wasn't his voice. It was his hand. A cashier's hand resting firmly but gently on my wrist, stopping me before I could reach for the small birthday cake I had saved for all week. "Are you Susan Miller? Are you Joshua's mother?" he whispered, glancing toward the security mirror above the counter. I nodded, the hum of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. His next words slid under my skin like a chill. "You need to be careful around your daughter-in-law's family." That warning stayed with me long after I left Harrison's grocery that afternoon. I was 68, a retired nurse from Columbus, Ohio, living on a fixed income. My only son, Joshua, was 32, hardworking, kind, and far too trusting. His wife, Rachel, came from a family who always seemed to need help. Money for medicine, repairs, rent. My boy had inherited my soft heart. Family takes care of family, he always said. But as I stepped into the cold parking lot that day, I realized kindness could sometimes become a weapon in the wrong hands. The man's name was David Parker, and his warning began to unravel everything I thought I knew. Moments after I left the store, I watched from behind two dumpsters as Rachel's father, William Thompson, strutted out carrying glossy designer bags, Gucci no less, and loaded them into a brand new SUV. I froze, listening as his laughter carried across the parking lot. "Joshua just sent another check for Patricia's medication," he said over the phone. "We're covered." My stomach dropped. My son had just told me he'd transferred money that morning. That was the moment I knew something was terribly wrong. That evening, as I held the cake on my lap and rode with Joshua to his house, I studied his face. He looked older than his years, lines etched by exhaustion and worry. "You okay, Mom?" he asked, glancing at me. "Just tired," I lied. He didn't notice how tightly I clutched the box or how my thoughts were spiraling. I had spent decades protecting this boy, working double shifts after his father died, stretching every dollar to keep him clothed and fed. I thought I'd taught him strength, but maybe I'd only taught him sacrifice. Joshua met Rachel 3 years earlier at a company event. She was charming, polished, the kind of woman who seemed born knowing how to make people admire her. When I met her family at the wedding rehearsal, they were gracious and warm, her father confident, her mother gentle. They said Joshua was the son they never had. I believed them. But after the honeymoon, the requests began small at first: help with a mortgage payment, then a car repair, then medical bills. Joshua never hesitated. "They'd do the same for us," he said. I stayed silent, not wanting to seem like the suspicious mother-in-law. But the lies grew subtle at first, then blatant. Each month brought a new emergency. Joshua took overtime shifts, drained his savings, and yet somehow Rachel's parents still lived comfortably. Their clothes were designer, their home in an affluent suburb, and their vacations frequent. Every time I tried to voice concern, Joshua brushed it off. "You're reading too much into things, Mom." So I started watching quietly. I noticed the new jewelry Patricia wore, the upgraded car in their driveway, the social media photos from expensive restaurants. None of it matched their stories of hardship. Then came the night Rachel called crying. William was in the hospital, she said. They needed $500 for tests the insurance wouldn't cover. My heart raced, but my training as a nurse told me something was off. Real hospitals don't demand deposits for emergency cardiac care. Which hospital? I asked. Riverside Methodist, she sobbed. I told her I was coming. She tried to protest, but I was already pulling on my coat. When I arrived, Joshua was waiting anxiously. Rachel's mother, Patricia, was at the vending machine, perfectly composed, her makeup flawless. "It's been such a nightmare," she said, touching my arm. "They're running tests now." "Which doctor?" I asked casually. "Oh, Dr. Smith?" she said quickly. I knew she was lying. At the nurse's station, I asked if William Thompson had been admitted. The nurse checked twice. "No one by that name here," she said. I returned to the waiting area where Rachel appeared, eyes red and mascara artfully smudged. "He's resting," she said, breathlessly. I looked her straight in the eye. "Interesting," I said, "because Riverside says no. William Thompson was admitted tonight." Her mouth opened, then closed again. And right then, William himself strolled in through the sliding doors, perfectly healthy briefcase in hand, dressed in an expensive suit. "Sorry I'm late," he said cheerfully. The silence that followed was deafening. Joshua's face went white. Rachel's tears dried instantly. Patricia froze mid-step. And in that moment, the illusion shattered. My son realized the truth. His wife and her parents had been lying for years. I could see it in his eyes, the disbelief, the heartbreak. He whispered, "Mom, what have they done?" That night, as he drove me home in silence, I knew there was no turning back. My gentle, trusting son had been deceived by the people he loved most. And I had only one goal left: to uncover the full truth and make sure they could never hurt him again. Joshua barely spoke during the drive home. The soft hum of the engine filled the silence as streetlights cast shifting shadows across his face. "I should have known," he finally whispered, voice trembling. There were signs. I reached for his arm. "You believed in people, Joshua. That's not a weakness. It's who you are." But I saw the devastation in his eyes, 3 years of trust crumbling into dust. When he dropped me off, I promised him we'd handle it logically, not emotionally. "Tomorrow," I said, "we start gathering proof." By morning, my plan was set. I called Sarah Jenkins, a retired bank manager, and my friend from the community garden. If anyone could help me navigate financial records discreetly, it was her. Within an hour, we sat in her cozy kitchen, surrounded by the smell of cinnamon coffee. When I finished explaining, she nodded grimly. "They're classic con artists, Susan. Small lies building towards something bigger. But we'll need hard evidence." I told her about David Parker, the cashier who'd warned me. Sarah leaned forward. "Talk to him again. People like that notice everything." That afternoon, I returned to Harrison's grocery. David was stocking shelves when he spotted me. "Mrs. Miller," he said softly, "I was hoping you'd come back." We sat in the cafe by the window where he told me everything. His cousin had once dated William Thompson years ago. Same pattern loans for business opportunities that never existed. "He's smooth," David said, bitterness in his voice. "Knows exactly how much to ask for, so it feels believable." He pulled out his phone and showed me a spreadsheet. "I've tracked their purchases here. Expensive wines, imported cheeses, always after your son's checks clear." My stomach turned. "How do you know all this?" I asked. "Because my grandmother was scammed by people just like them," he said quietly. "No one believed her until she lost everything." His jaw tightened. "I won't watch it happen again." He promised to send me copies of the receipts and even connect me to a friend at the bank who could confirm whether the Thompsons' house was really under mortgage. Later that night, he texted, "Your instincts were right. Their home's been fully paid off for 5 years." That fact broke something in me. Every tearful plea about mortgage payments had been a lie. Every check Joshua wrote, every hour of overtime he worked, it had all fed their greed. I opened my old nursing journal and began writing. Dates, transactions, details, every piece of evidence went into that notebook. I wouldn't accuse them without proof, but once I had it, they'd never manipulate my son again. The next few days blurred into quiet investigation. I visited the Thompsons' neighborhood pretending to be interested in property values. Their house stood immaculate, freshly painted, with luxury cars gleaming in the driveway. A neighbor, Barbara Delaney, chatted with me over her fence. The Thompsons, oh, they're doing fine. Renovated their kitchen last year, take cruises all the time. Her casual tone hit me like a slap. I thanked her and walked away, my mind racing. Joshua's money had funded their vacations. That evening, Joshua called, voice heavy. "Mom, they're behind on their mortgage again," he said bitterly. I took a deep breath. "Joshua, have you ever seen a single bill?" He hesitated. "No, but—" "Then stop giving them money until you do?" I interrupted gently. "Just promise me that." The silence stretched before he said quietly, "Okay, Mom, I promise." But the Thompsons weren't done. 2 nights later, Joshua called in a panic. "Mom, it's another emergency. Rachel says her dad's in the hospital again." I closed my eyes, remembering the last lie. "Which hospital this time? Riverside again," he said. My pulse quickened. "Then meet me there," I said. By the time I arrived, Joshua looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes. Patricia was in the waiting area, her outfit immaculate, her demeanor calm. "Oh, Susan," she said with feigned concern, "you didn't have to rush. I asked which doctor was treating William." "Dr. Smith," she replied again. My patience snapped. I went straight to the nurse's station. "William Thompson," I said. The nurse frowned. "We don't have any patient by that name tonight." I returned to find Rachel walking toward us, mascara smudged in perfect symmetry. "He's resting," she said softly. "They just took him for tests." I smiled. "That's strange. The hospital has no record of him." The color drained from her face. "There must be a mistake," she stammered. "No," I said quietly. "The mistake is thinking we'd believe you twice." And as if summoned by my words, William himself appeared, healthy, confident briefcase in hand. Joshua's expression twisted into horror. The truth was undeniable. That night, back at my apartment, Joshua broke down for the first time. "They've taken everything from me," he said, burying his face in his hands. "My savings, my trust, my marriage." I sat beside him, placing my hand over his. "Then we take it back." The next morning I called David. "We're ready to fight," I said. He didn't hesitate. "Then you'll want to see what I found last night. It's bigger than just money, Mrs. Miller. They're planning something else." David's voice crackled over the phone. "They applied for a home equity loan last week, nearly $200,000. And guess who the collateral contact is listed as? My grip on the receiver tightened. Joshua." "Exactly. They used his name and income as their backup reference," David said. "My friend at the bank froze the process until they verify authorization." My pulse pounded. The Thompsons weren't just manipulating, they were escalating. I met Joshua that evening at his friend Mike's apartment, where he'd been staying since walking out on Rachel. His face was pale but resolute. "I've been reviewing our joint accounts," he said quietly. "They've taken more than $25,000 in the last 2 years, always through fake emergencies." He showed me his spreadsheet, every transaction labeled with Rachel's excuses, Dad's medication, roof, repair hospital bills. The pattern was nauseating. You were generous, I told him gently. They were deceitful. There's a difference. But I could see how deeply it cut him to admit he'd been fooled by people he loved. We agreed to gather everything: bank records, receipts, statements. We need proof. Not anger, I said. Joshua nodded, though his jaw was tight. They're not getting away with this. Over the next few days, Sarah Jenkins and David Parker became our quiet allies. Sarah reached out to a contact in property records and confirmed the Thompsons' house had no active mortgage. David compiled every grocery receipt, showing luxury purchases, wine, imported cheese, champagne, on the same days Rachel had called Joshua crying about overdue bills. Then came the final piece. Barbara Delaney, their neighbor, agreed to give a statement. They're not victims, she told me over the phone. They brag about their cruises and golf memberships. Everyone in the neighborhood knows they live well. By Friday, we had a mountain of evidence and a clear picture of the truth. The Thompsons weren't struggling. They were orchestrating a calculated con. They used Rachel to maintain access to Joshua's money, painting themselves as helpless while living extravagantly behind closed doors. I met Joshua at Mike's that night, spreading the papers across the dining table. You ready? I asked. He nodded, eyes cold with focus. Tomorrow I confront Rachel. When morning came, Joshua met his wife at a cafe downtown. I waited by the window of a shop across the street, watching through the reflection as he placed the folder on the table. Rachel's reaction was visible, even from a distance: shock. Then tears. Then defensiveness. When she stood and stormed out, I knew the confrontation was over. He called me soon after. She admitted some of it, he said bitterly. Claims her parents pressured her. I told her it's over. My heart ached for him, but there was relief too. The spell was breaking. For 2 weeks, the Thompsons went silent. Then Patricia called. Susan, she began in her syrupy voice, we'd like to invite you to lunch, just to clear the air. Every instinct screamed trap, but curiosity won. Fine, I said. Sunday at noon. Joshua wasn't thrilled. Be careful, Mom. They'll try to twist things. I know I said slipping my notebook into my purse, but I want to see them lie to my face one last time. Their home looked even grander than before. Fresh paint, manicured lawn, gleaming cars in the driveway. Patricia greeted me in silk, the smell of expensive perfume heavy in the air. William's just finishing a call, she said, leading me inside. The house looked like a showroom. New leather furniture, designer decor, imported rugs. I smiled faintly. The renovations turned out beautifully. Hard to believe you're struggling so much. Her smile flickered. Lunch was a performance. Crystal glasses, roasted lamb, and imported cheese filled the table. We just want to make peace, Patricia began. Perhaps we exaggerated a few things, but we always intended to repay Joshua. I set my cup down. You mean repay him with his own kindness? William's eyes narrowed. What do you want, Susan? Money? An apology. Neither. I said softly. I want you to stop. He leaned forward, voice sharp. Be careful with your accusations. We have resources, connections. You don't want to start something you can't finish. I held his gaze. You should be the one careful, William. The bank has frozen your loan. Your neighbors have submitted statements, and the district attorney's office will be reviewing your financial activity next week. His jaw tightened, and Patricia's fork clattered against her plate. You can't prove anything, she snapped. We can prove everything I said. When I stood to leave, William followed me to the door. You're making a mistake, he hissed. We can ruin your son's career. I turned to him calmly. Try it, and you'll find out how strong a mother's resolve can be." His expression faltered, uncertainty creeping into his eyes. "Tell Joshua this isn't over," he said. "You're right," I replied. "It's just beginning." Back home, Joshua was waiting. "How bad was it?" he asked. "Worse than I thought," I admitted. "But I think they're scared." He nodded grimly and opened his laptop. "Then let's make sure they have a reason to be." He clicked on a folder labeled Emails. "Rachel used my computer," he said. "She forgot to delete her messages." Inside were dozens of emails between her and her parents' discussions of planned emergencies, payment splits, and one recent message that froze my blood. It read, "He knows everything. Time for Plan B. Dad can use the company info Rachel gathered. Once he files the lawsuit, they'll have to settle." Joshua looked up, face pale. "They're going to sue my company using confidential data I told Rachel in trust. If they do, it could ruin me." I exhaled slowly. "Then we have no choice. We fight back. And this time, we make it public." We spent that night planning every move as though it were a chess match. Joshua contacted his company's legal department first thing the next morning, explaining the threat and handing over the emails as evidence. They moved swiftly, drafting cease and desist letters to prevent any misuse of confidential data. Meanwhile, I called Sarah and David. "It's worse than we thought," I told them. "They're trying to weaponize his career." Sarah didn't hesitate. Then, we cut off their access completely. By 10:15 a.m., Sarah called back with an update. The bank froze their accounts for review. The home equity loan is suspended pending investigation. I could almost hear the satisfaction in her voice. Apparently, William showed up this morning demanding answers. Security had to escort him out. The image made me smile grimly. After years of manipulating others, he was finally losing control. That afternoon, Joshua phoned again. "Rachel just tried to withdraw $15,000 from our joint savings," he said. "The bank flagged it. They called me before processing." "What did you tell them?" I asked. "I approved $500 to avoid alerting them, but the rest is locked." His tone hardened. "They're desperate, Mom. Desperation makes people reckless," I warned. "Be ready for anything," or... Sure enough, at 6:00 p.m., my phone rang. "Patricia." Her voice was sugar-coated panic. "Susan, we've made mistakes. We want to make it right. Please, can we talk?" "We already have," I said evenly. "The time for talk is over." "You don't understand," she pleaded. "William's business could collapse. We'll lose everything. You should have thought of that before you tried to destroy my son's life," I said, my patience gone. Then came the slip. "It was Rachel's idea to use the company files. We never wanted—" She caught herself too late. I stayed silent, letting the weight of her words hang. "You have until noon tomorrow," I said. "Full restitution, signed confession, or we go to the district attorney." I hung up before she could respond. When Joshua arrived that night, exhaustion lined his face, but there was a spark in his eyes. "The company's legal team is backing me," he said. "They'll testify that Rachel accessed confidential data without authorization. If the Thompsons file anything, they'll be crushed." I nodded, proud of his calm resolve. Then it's time for the final move. The next morning, Rachel texted him, "My parents want to meet. They'll pay everything back." We agreed to meet at a cafe downtown, a public place with plenty of witnesses. Joshua brought his friend Mike to sit nearby as a silent observer. I arrived a few minutes early, choosing a table where I could see both exits. Joshua joined me, folder in hand, the same one we'd been building for weeks. At 10:07 a.m., the Thompsons entered. William looked pale but defiant. Patricia nervous and brittle. Rachel trailed behind, eyes darting like a cornered animal. Susan! Joshua William greeted us curtly. Let's make this quick. I gestured to the folder. Our terms, I said. Joshua laid out the documents, proof of their fraud statements from witnesses and the restitution agreement. Sign this, he said evenly, return every cent you stole, and agree never to contact us again. In exchange, we won't press charges. William skimmed the pages, his jaw tightening. You can't prove intent, he snapped. It'll be your word against ours. Actually, I said, we have your words. I slid a printed email across the table, the one discussing their plan to sue Joshua's company. Patricia's face drained of color. Where did you get this? She whispered. From your daughter's deleted folder, Joshua said coldly. You used her as a pawn, and now she's dragged you all down with her. Rachel's voice cracked. Joshua, please. I didn't mean for it to go this far. He looked at her eyes filled with quiet grief. You meant every step of it, Rachel. You just didn't think I'd ever stop trusting you. William exhaled through his nose, a man cornered. If we sign, you'll keep this private. We'll keep it out of court, Joshua replied. That's as far as my mercy goes. Patricia reached for the pen first. Her hand trembled as she signed. William hesitated longer, but finally scrawled his name. His confidence drained. Rachel stared at the paper for several seconds before whispering, I'm sorry, and signing too. Signing. 3 days, Joshua said. The money must be returned in full. William stood abruptly, his expression a mix of resentment and humiliation. You've destroyed us, he hissed. I met his glare without flinching. No, William. You destroyed yourselves the day you decided to prey on kindness. When they left, the tension in the cafe lifted. Joshua sat back, exhaling deeply. Is it really over? He asked quietly. It's over, I said. They can't touch you anymore. He rubbed his temples. I thought forgiveness meant giving people another chance. Sometimes I said softly, forgiveness means finally giving yourself one. 3 days later, a wire transfer appeared in Joshua's account, $27,453. A note followed from their attorney confirming repayment and compliance with the agreement. It was done. Months passed and life slowly began to heal. Joshua finalized his divorce. Rachel sent one last letter, a blend of apology and excuse. He never replied. Instead, he poured his energy into his work, earning a promotion for his integrity during the ordeal. I started volunteering at a local senior center, teaching financial safety workshops. People listened when I told them how easily love can be weaponized by those who see trust as currency. 1 year later, Joshua introduced me to Lawrence, a kind science teacher with an easy laugh and steady eyes. This time, I saw no performance, no pretense, just genuine warmth. Watching them together restored something in me I hadn't realized was broken faith. We met one sunny afternoon at Goodale Park, where Joshua handed me coffee and smiled. We're thinking about buying a duplex, he said. 2 homes side by side, one for us, one for you. I laughed through the sudden tears. You're stuck with me forever, huh? That's the plan, he said, squeezing my hand. As I watched the leaves drift down around us, I realized the truth. I wanted to share with everyone who'd ever been betrayed. Love isn't measured by how much you give. It's defined by what you refuse to let be taken from you. If you found meaning in this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more true stories of strength, justice, and redemption. And tell me in the comments, what would you have done in my place?